Hey yo, welcome to another episode of Hey Yo. I am the host of this show, podcast, whatever you want to call it, Del Rico Shelton. As always, we are sponsored by Rose Sweets LLC. That's Rose Sweets LLC, the best cake pops and cupcakes in the DMV area. You can look them up on roll underscore sweets underscore LLC on Facebook and Instagram. You can also contact them at Rose Sweets LLC at gmail.com. Check them out. I love that red velvet cupcake, by the way. As always, you also saw the good old graphics of Riverside.fm, who provides the platform so I can get the good stuff out to y'all on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. They will also help you out with getting that stuff going. And guess what? They start you off, it's free. I know, cheap plug. I got to give some props. Let's get right into it. As of I'm recording this. This was done after the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz, aka as I call him, Coach Walz, and J.D. Vance for the hopefully hopeful being the vice president of the United States for both candidates. Let's just say that I was kind of surprised that this debate was very, very civil. It really was. I'm shocked. Both candidates really didn't go after each other except maybe one time. Excuse me, where JD Vance was trying to talk over and spew some lying bullshit, and both candidates got their mic cut. And that's all it took. In other words, CBS officials, even though I'm still mad that they didn't fact check immediately, they said, yo, we ain't having this shit. Doodoo Don ain't controlling this. We run this shit. So both candidates cleaned up the act at that point, right? Um, if I was to give a win, if you want to call it, Coach Walz won. Why? Because he did more information. He gave you more info. And JD Vance glanced over a whole bunch of questions. You know. But JD Vance was slick with some stuff. I'm gonna kind of delve into that a little bit. This ain't gonna be a long, drawn out podcast, people. It's late. I'm tired. I won't go sleep. But I promise I'd talk to y'all about this vice presidential debate stuff. Um, Everybody tends to forget that Tim Walz is the governor of the great state of Minnesota, who deals with gun violence, rural areas. See, Minnesota is one of those states that has everything. They have urban area, they have rural areas. So this man, who Kamala Harris chose to be her running mate, kind of can throw some stuff out that no one else actually can. And now I see why 1000% why she chose him, because he can speak to the rural person, he can speak to the urban person, he can speak to a person that got money, he can speak to a person to someone who's basically broke, as most Americans actually are, to be honest. We broke. But um let's get into some stuff. I wrote some things down. You know what I mean? I got some paperwork for once. So if I'm looking at, you know, paper, I apologize. You know, but one of the biggest things, I'm gonna kind of go through some steps here. Because like I said, I'm not gonna be on this joint long. I clicked on the thing where NBC said for the facts checks and whatever. It was kind of weak. I ain't gonna lie, that shit was weak because it really only did a couple things and then just describe what everybody was saying. But I digress. Things that I know. Okay. There was a question dealing with clean energy, basically. J.D. Vance never really answered about, climate change. Excuse me. J.D. Vance never really answered about climate change. But he said bringing manufacturing jobs to the U.S. because China and others use dirty parts would actually help with clean energy. Clean water, clean air, stuff like that. Um, as a dude that wants to preserve the planet for his grandchildren, nephews, nieces, kids alike, when I'm dead and gone, JD Vance didn't know what the fuck he was talking about with that. Pretty much he avoided that question because there's only two ways we can actually handle climate change. If Hurricane Helene didn't teach you anything, it teaches you that a hurricane can go past the water and go into some states, even to the western part of the states because of the rain. The planet's on fucking fire, dude. So there's two ways you can handle it. You can lower carbon emissions. For those that don't know what that means, it pretty much helps with carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and other poisons that actually go up into our atmosphere and stay there because the earth doesn't have enough time to actually get rid of them. It's a give and take type of thing. In other words, we breathe in oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. That's how our plants, who breathe carbon dioxide, majority of them. But if there's too much carbon dioxide, it stays in the atmosphere and it becomes a greenhouse effect. Science 101. So we either gotta stop with the carbon emissions, lower that, or just flat out use renewable energy, aka green energy. You know, the wind turbines that Donald Trump says causes cancer and kills the birds. It actually will boost the economy, to be honest. You know why? Because you get more jobs. Coal is a dead industry. Pretty soon, fracking, you get everything is finite except for wind and things of that nature. So we can get electric cars to go. I'm not a fan of electric cars. I will admit that. You get more of those that are sustainable. Guess what happens? There's less carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and other poisonous gases go into the atmosphere. And eventually the planet won't be on fucking fire. And then at that point, guess what? Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, things like that, they happen less frequently or at least less violently. How about that? Next thing. I got to look at it because brother got glasses, you know what I mean? But, JD Vance also pretty much ignored the question that the moderators were saying that didn't your candidate say, aka Donald Trump, say climate change was a hoax? He ignored that part too. JD Vance spewed lies saying Donald Trump's immigration policies were strong. Let me break this down. He ain't do shit. The border, the wall, 2%. Said Mexico was going to pay for the wall. Didn't Mexico pay for anything? Nope. He made 2% of the wall. Nope. Technically speaking, immigration was actually higher. Illegal immigration was higher under Trump. And Biden actually lowered it. Notice I said Biden, not Kamala. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But executive orders. You know why I did executive orders? Because there was a Republican who came with a conservative bill that Democrats agreed to, and the Senate agreed to, and the House of Representatives agreed to. And Donald Trump made a call and said, "No, don't do that because I need to run on something." Coach Walls actually pointed that out too. JD Vance had no answer, saying they had 3.5 years. Let me explain something, JD Vance. This is what I'm saying. Y'all full of shit. And me doing the TikTok, which I did after, by the way, me doing the TikTok is not going to do the justice. Donald Trump had 4 years, ain't do shit. He had the House of Representatives and the Senate for the last two, ain't do shit. So we're going to pass the buck to a Democrat. Then what it could have been fixed basically 6 years ago. Make it make sense. That's what Republicans do. They do talking points, but never solve a fucking problem. Have y'all noticed that shit? I know y'all. I know that people with common sense, they notice it. People that don't, you just have low intelligence. What can I say? I'm not being the tolerant left anymore. I'm gonna just call you what a spade is spade. You stupid. Stupid. Um, I'm gonna leave this one. I'm gonna leave this one that I just wrote down last because this is very important. JD Vance never answered about kids being separated at the border from their parents. He did not. It's one of the most inhumane things to do. This question came about because of the mass deportation that Donald Trump wants to do. First off, how you going to pay for it? One, how you going to do it? You can get the armed forces to do it. And the reason why that I wrote that particular part down is because if the kid is born in the United States, guess what? They're a United States citizen. So you're going to keep the kid and ship the parents. Or you're going to ship the kid with the parents. But once again, mass deportation, which pretty much people on the right want. Let me explain something to y'all. And I'm not being tolerant. 80% of agriculture that's done in this country are done by illegal immigrants, immigrants that were here legally, or undocumented immigrants. 80%. So if you get rid of the illegals and the undocumented, those that are seeking asylum, guess what happens? You don't want to do the job. That's already been proven in Florida. You remember when there was a mass exodus of undocumented people a couple years ago? And they went to other states, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and further up. Remember that? Yeah, you can't get none of the construction done in Florida, can you? What about, oranges, agriculture, stuff like that? It's amazing y'all don't want to do those jobs though. And once again, I'm gonna say it one more time. If a person that can barely speak English or can't speak English comes over, because this is what pissed me off also what JD Vance said. Illegal migrants coming to take jobs, stuff like that. If an alien, illegal immigrant, excuse me, comes over that can barely speak English or can't speak English at all, comes across the border and takes your job, you are shitty at your job. I'm gonna say it again. If a person, I'm gonna speak slow. If a person that can barely speak English or cannot speak English at all comes across the border illegally and takes your job, you are shitty at your job. Next point, and I love this one. Oh, like I said, JD Vance really never answered how he can handle that. This is from the Wharton Business School, the school that Donald Trump went to, by the way. Trump's economic plan, increases the national deficit by $5.8 billion. Whereas Kamala Harris's economic plan increases the deficit by $1.2 billion. I can deal with the 1.2 because it's going back to the middle class. It's not going to higher ups. It's not going to tariffs. Once again, tariffs. And JD Vance thought he was slick with this. Now that I'm thinking about it, he said, "I don't know why people keep calling it a national tax because it's not. Technically, you're right. It's not, but really, it is. I'm gonna explain it once again because this is the business I am in. Um, the company that I worked for dealt with China and tariffs and stuff. What happens is this: thing gets manufactured, it gets shipped over. There's a charge to that country to ship it over. So the company that wants it shipped over basically pays that tariff, right? Entails, let's say the tariff, let's say is $2,000, right? To bring it to ship it over. So you're charging you're charging China $2,000 to bring something over. China says, okay, we're gonna ship it, but the company is gonna pay for the shipping, which is a U.S. company. So the U.S. company has to pay some money to get it over. So China doesn't do much of a loss. Let's say it's $1,500. So China pays $5. Technically, the company pays $15. Guess who's gonna pay for that shit? That $1,500, because the company is not gonna do it. It's gonna go to the consumer. So that's how your prices get raised: groceries, cars, everything like that. I'm trying to break it down as simple as I can. It's complex, but it's kind of simple. Simple but complex. Let's just say that. You charge a country to bring some goods in. The company that is going to be used for is probably much going to pay for that shit. But then they're going to take that money that they had to pay to get it over because they want the product to you, the consumer, and me. That's basically what it is in a nutshell. And another thing that JD Vance glossed on. JD Vance, when it comes to gun violence in schools, the mass shootings, stuff like that, basically he wants to add more security to schools. I'm not even going to ask how or research how many actual schools there are in America. Let's just say they're just probably, I'll just say millions for school. When you deal with kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, colleges, junior colleges, you get my drift, public and private. He wants more security. The problem is the guns, JD Vance. Now, I'm all for the Second Amendment. Coach Walz and Kamala Harris have both said they have guns. Heck, in the debate, Coach Walz said he had a shotgun or some sort of rifle, and at school he would go ferret hunting or something. But he used common sense now, mainly because AK-47s and AK whatever number you want should not be in the hands of ordinary folks. He said in the state of Minnesota they did intensive background checks, red flag laws, all sorts of stuff. Minnesota is actually in the top either top one or top five in a lot of good ass categories since he's been governor. Go figure. And like I said, Minnesota got rural areas and urban areas. Go figure. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to a lot of the stuff. once again, I see why Kamala Harris chose him as the running mate. JD Vance had no answer with that, especially since you can't use that. And Coach Walz also mentioned NRA, which I think he's still a member of, by the way. I could be wrong on that. So yeah, JD Vance like, damn. You can see in his eyes, damn, I can't get him. But here's the biggest thing that I want to say. Oh well, before I get into that part, I'm gonna backtrack, and there's just a few more things, notes wise or whatever that I've picked up. But I'm not gonna bore y'all with all this stuff. It'll take too long. JD Vance thinks he was slick with some stuff. I've always been a proponent that you do need a conservative in the room. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I said what I just said. The only reason I say that, not to say you agree with them, but you need a different point of view. You may not agree. You may say, the hell with that. That's a dumbass idea. But you need a different point of view. I learned that from the movie World War Z. There was a scene where Brad Pitt and his family, when I want to say it was a city in India, and the guy said he was there was a council of 10. And it's always when they have a big idea or discussion, it's always one person's job to say no and give the reason. That's why that city was able to survive until, someone started singing and riled up the zombies and all other stuff. But he had pretty much that. I got it from there. You don't need a bunch of yes men and all that stuff. You do need someone to give you a different point of view. So we do need them, unfortunately. But JD Vance think he was slick because him and Coach Walz were not actually far apart on a lot of stuff. If you have a conversation, a civil conversation, you can agree to disagree. But if you have a civil conversation, you can find more common ground to get to the solution. Do I think JD Vance wants to have a solution to a lot of America's problems? Yes. It's hard for me to say that. Yes. Do I think that he's right in handling these situations? No. But I will give him credit for one thing, and that's the child care situation. Because I'm a grandfather. My daughter plays for daycare and stuff. Here's what I know. It's expensive as hell. Also, JD Vance really didn't give a solution, but he gave an idea with something. When it comes to a child being born, right? And there's maternal leave and paternal leave in a lot of countries. Oh, by the way, speaking of gun violence, Finland has a high rate of people having guns, but they don't have the mass shootings. JD Vance, not to skip over what I was about to say, but JD Vance said and tried to point out that we have a mental health crisis in this country. People have anxiety. I got my own thoughts with that as a dude that is big on mental health. And Tim Walz shut that as like, yo, we can't blame mental health for this, for the gun violence. So don't go there. You know why, people? Because people are fucking stressed. If you have a 40-hour work week, and then you have another second job just to make ends meet, JD Vance, that's probably the problem. A friend of mine told me a long time ago, and he's from, I want to say he was from Nigeria. He's in Nigeria or Ghana. And he said something to me because he lived in the UK as well. He said, Rico, the world works to live, where America lives to work. That stuck with me like a motherfucker. But I digress. Back to what my thought. I do believe that parental leave, paternal and maternal, is needed, especially when you have a baby. But J.D. Vance did say there should be some sort of choice system. That if a person wants to leave and go to work immediately, they can. And, the kid is taken care of a certain way. If they want to stay longer, your job pays for it. Some sort of parental, care. So I can see that point. Because there's some people that just want to, there are some people that just want to work. And then there's some people that want to stay with their child as much as possible so they can bond with the child. Good job, J.D. Vance. You made me think on that one. So him and Tim Walz had a somewhat sort of agreement. And Tim Walz even agrees, like, hey, that's a conversation that, I think we can have. You know what I mean? You can have conversations to find certain things out. This is before Donald Trump. Before Mitch McConnell got all gung-ho because a black man started running the country. This was kind of Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, to be honest, started all this shit. I'll leave that alone. So what I'm saying now, back to J.D. Vance being slipped. When I said it was very cordial, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz were bouncing off each other to a certain degree. They're not too far apart on ideas to come together for solutions. The reason why I say J.D. Vance is slick because the dude, as a dude that wasn't always, I'm saying nice. I seen some shit. J.D. Vance is a slickster. He's going to say what you want. He's going to say what you want to hear so he can get what he wants and then turn the tide. Be careful of that shit because he's looking to steal people that were on the right but kind of leaning towards Kamala. And say, wait a minute, J.D. Vance, he kind of gets it, not Donald Trump. So we might be able to. You see where I'm getting at? He's trying to take some votes away. That's what he's supposed to. Don't get me wrong. But he's trying to take those votes from Kamala Harris and Tim slide over to Donald Trump himself because he wants to be the one to say, I'm likable, not Donald Trump. Trust me, not Trump. No. You with him. Let's get it. You're with him. As long as you're with him, we can't fuck with you. You are part of the company you keep, sir. Sorry, not sorry. So be careful of that, peeps. I've seen that type of shit all the time. Since I was a kid. And it happens even in business today. It's happening at your job right now. You know it is. But here's the biggest thing that I want to talk about before I get up out of here. J.D. Vance keep mentioning during the vice presidential debate, the Kamala Harris administration. He did that on purpose. Let me reiterate this. Because I don't understand what happened in civics class. I learned this shit again in the 3rd grade. It was enforced in high school. The vice president does not make fucking policies, sir. She's in the war room. And generally, he or she is the last person that the president talks to for advice to get another point of view. Vice president's job is mainly to reside over the Senate, to break ties and shit. Kamala Harris does not have any power. She doesn't have any power now. So when he said the Kamala Harris campaign, he was doing that for the uneducated and low intelligent people that don't know how government works. You think you slick. You ain't slick, bruh. I peeped that game. And he kept saying the Kamala Harris administration, Kamala Harris policies. She doesn't have any policies. Sorry, that's Joe Biden's policies, not Kamala Harris. Two different people. Might be similar, but two different people. It's Joe Biden policies, not Kamala Harris. Now, if you want to say the Joe Biden administration, where she's part of, that's something totally different, and you will be correct in saying that. But other than that, you're dead wrong. She has no policies. She has no policies that was enacted. She doesn't have the power to sign litigation. Sorry. You think you're slick. I caught that. I hope a lot of people caught that too. It is what it is. But overall, like I said, to summarize this, it was very cordial. JD Vance came off as not as sleazy. But you gotta be careful. He's that car salesman that nods his head and agrees, and yeah, next thing you know, you don't board a car. It's twice what you want to pay for it. I'm just saying. To summarize this, Coach Walls, I believe, won the debate because he had more info. JD Vance glanced over a whole lot of questions and told some lies. I'm not going to get into the lies. I just mentioned some of the stuff. Oh, he also, once again, would not answer the question about did Donald Trump lose the election. He glanced over that. Didn't mention that Donald Trump did do the peaceful transfer of power. How? He wasn't there, as most tradition is, where the former president is there. He wasn't there. He incited a riot, January 6th. Remember that? And we got to start down on that revisionist history that people on the right tend to do. But I digress. Once again, JD Vance is still some shit. He just made himself more presentable to the American people, which I think was the ultimate goal. I'm not Trump per se. Yes, you are, because you wrote the foreword for Project 2025, the agenda that you want to do. It's all good. We see you, dude. But I'm about to get up out of here. Next time y'all see me or hear this voice, it should be Sunday night after Dallas versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. It might be that morning because it's Sunday night football. That game ain't going to be over till midnight. Brother got to go to work. So it might be the next day. But until then, as I always tell you all, may Father... Oh, before I forget, once again, thank you, Rose Sweets, for the sponsorship. Once again, Rose Sweets LLC for the best cupcakes and cake pops in the DMV area. You can reach them at row_sweets_LLC on Instagram and Facebook. You can also contact them, rosesweetsllc@gmail.com. And once again, thank you for Riverside.fm for giving me the platform to get this out to you all in Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. Please like and share and subscribe to Hey Yo with D Sheldon. I greatly appreciate it. Click that like and that bell, that ding, so you'll be notified of whenever I'll get online. I'm trying to be more consistent, but more likely you're going to hear me after every Dallas Cowboy game, or at least the next day after. All right. Now, as I always say, may Father and ancestors take care of you, your loved ones, and anybody else that you care about. I see y'all when I see y'all. Peace.